The auctioneer's hammer came down with a crack that split the humid Texas afternoon, and Kyle Winchester knew he had just made either the biggest mistake of his life or the best decision he would ever make. The woman standing on the platform before him kept her eyes fixed firmly on the ground, her dark hair falling forward to hide most of her face, but not enough to conceal the jagged scar that ran from her left temple down to her jawline. It was the summer of 1878 in Humboldt, Texas, and the drought had driven desperate people to desperate measures. Kyle had not come to town intending to buy a woman. He had come for supplies, for seed to replant the sections of his ranch that the last storm had washed away, for rope and nails and all the mundane necessities that kept a cattle operation running. But something about the way she stood there, shoulders back despite the humiliation, chin lifted just slightly in defiance even as tears tracked silently down her cheeks, had stopped him in his tracks. When the bidding started low and stayed low, when men in the crowd made crude comments about damaged goods, something hot and protective had flared in his chest. $200, he had called out, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. It was more than twice the highest bid, more than he could reasonably afford with the ranch still recovering. But he could not let her go to any of the leering men who had been eyeing her like a piece of meat. Now, as the auctioneer gestured for him to come collect his purchase, Kyle felt the weight of what he had done settling onto his shoulders. He was 26 years old, had been running his family's ranch alone since his father died 2 years prior, and had never expected to acquire a wife this way. He had always imagined courting a woman properly, maybe one of the school teachers who came out from the East or the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Not this. Never this. He climbed the steps to the platform, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he had first thought, probably around 22 or 23. The scar was old, healed over into thick tissue that pulled slightly at the corner of her left eye. But her right eye, when she finally glanced up at him, was a stunning shade of blue-green, like the ocean he had seen once as a boy. "My name is Kyle Winchester," he said quietly, aware of the crowd still watching. "I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. It is not much, but it is honest work and honest living." She said nothing, just nodded once, a tiny dip of her chin. The auctioneer thrust a piece of paper at Kyle, some sort of certificate of sale that made his stomach turn. He signed it because the law required it, because that was how these things worked in desperate times, but he hated every second of it. Then he offered his arm to the woman, and after a long moment of hesitation, she took it. They walked through the crowd in silence, people parting to let them pass. Kyle could feel their stares, hear their whispers. He kept his eyes forward and his stride steady. His wagon was at the far end of the main street, his 2 horses stamping impatiently in the heat. He helped her up onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her. Only when they were out of town, the dusty buildings of Humboldt fading behind them, did he speak again. "I want you to know something," he said, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. "I did not buy you to use you. I have a spare room in my house. You can sleep there. You do not owe me anything except maybe some help around the place if you are willing, but I will not force you to do anything you do not want to do." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, her expression a mixture of suspicion and fragile hope. "Why?" Her voice was hoarse, as if she had not used it in a long time. "Why would you spend that much money and not expect?" "Because what they were doing back there was wrong," Kyle said flatly. "And because you looked like you needed someone to give a damn." They rode in silence for a while after that. The landscape rolled past, brown and parched from the drought, dotted here and there with stubborn mesquite trees and patches of prickly pear. Hawks circled overhead, and in the distance, Kyle could see a small herd of antelope moving across the plains. "My name is Beatrice Vaughn," she said finally, so quietly he almost missed it over the creaking of the wagon wheels. "Most people call me B." "Pleased to meet you, B," Kyle said, and meant it. The Winchester ranch was not impressive by any standards. The house was small, just 4 rooms, built from rough-hewn timber and limestone that Kyle and his father had quarried themselves. The barn was in slightly better shape, and there was a decent-sized corral with about 20 head of cattle visible in the near pasture. A windmill turned lazily near the house, pumping water into a trough. B took it all in with an unreadable expression as Kyle brought the wagon to a stop. He jumped down and came around to help her, but she had already climbed down on her own, her simple dress dusty from the road. "It is not much," Kyle said again, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "But the roof does not leak, and the well water is clean." "It is more than I have had in a long time," B said simply. He showed her inside, pointing out the kitchen with its cast iron stove, the main room with its fireplace and simple furniture, and finally, the spare bedroom. It was small, barely big enough for the narrow bed and dresser it contained, but it had a window that looked out over the eastern pasture, and Kyle had made sure it had a door that locked from the inside. "I will be in the room at the end of the hall," he said. "If you need anything, just knock. I am usually up before dawn to see to the cattle, but I will make sure there is coffee and breakfast before I go." B stood in the doorway of her new room, one hand resting on the doorframe. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not understand why you are being kind to me, but thank you." Kyle wanted to say something profound, something that would make her understand that he was not like the men who had leered at her in town, but all he could manage was, "Everyone deserves kindness." That first night, Kyle lay awake in his own bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering what he had gotten himself into. He could hear Bea moving around in her room, the creak of the bed frame as she settled in. He hoped she was not crying, hoped she felt safe here, but he had no way of knowing. All he could do was give her space and time. The next morning, he woke before dawn as usual, and was surprised to find Bea already in the kitchen when he stumbled out, still half asleep. She had somehow figured out how to work the stove and had coffee brewing and bacon frying. "You did not have to do that," Kyle said, but he could not keep the appreciation out of his voice. He had been making his own meals for 2 years, and while he was competent, he was not exactly a skilled cook. "I need to earn my keep somehow," Bea said. She still was not looking directly at him, keeping the scarred side of her face angled slightly away. They ate in comfortable silence, and then Kyle headed out to start his work. There were fences to mend, cattle to check on, 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running. When he came back at midday for lunch, he found that Bea had cleaned the entire house, washing dishes that had been piling up, sweeping floors, even beating the dust out of the rug in the main room. "You have been busy," he said, impressed. "I do not like being idle," she replied, setting a plate of cold meat and bread in front of him. "And I meant what I said about earning my keep." Over the next 2 days, they fell into a routine. Kyle worked the ranch and Bea took care of the house. They shared meals, speaking in short sentences, learning the rhythms of each other's presence. Kyle noticed that Bea always sat with her left side away from him, always kept her hair arranged to cover as much of the scar as possible. He never commented on it, never stared, but he could see the shame she carried in the way she held herself. On the 3rd night, after supper, Kyle was sitting on the porch watching the sun set when Bea came out and sat in the other chair. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. "About why I was at that auction, about where this scar came from." Kyle turned to look at her, but she was staring straight ahead, her jaw tight. "You do not owe me any explanations," he said gently. "Yes, I do," Bea said. "Because you paid good money for me, and you deserve to know what kind of trouble you might have bought yourself." She took a deep breath, and then the words started spilling out, fast and pained, as if she had been holding them in for too long. "I was married before. His name was Thomas Vaughn. We met in Louisiana, where I grew up. He seemed like a good man, charming and hardworking. My parents approved of him, and I thought I loved him. We married when I was 19. She paused, her hands gripping each other so tightly her knuckles went white. For the first few months, everything was fine. But then he started drinking, and when he drank, he became someone else. Someone mean and violent. He would hit me, scream at me, tell me I was worthless. I tried to hide it from my family, tried to convince myself it would get better. But it only got worse." Kyle felt anger building in his chest, hot and fierce, but he kept silent, letting her tell her story. "One night, about 3 years ago, he came home drunk and angry. I do not even remember what set him off. Maybe I had not cooked his supper right, or I had looked at him wrong. He started hitting me, worse than ever before. I tried to fight back, tried to get away, and he grabbed a knife from the kitchen. He said he was going to teach me a lesson about respecting my husband." Her hand came up to touch the scar, fingers tracing its path down her face. "He held me down and cut me. Said he was marking me so everyone would know I belonged to him, so no other man would ever want me. I thought he was going to kill me, but then my brother burst through the door. He had heard me screaming from his house next door. There was a fight, and in the struggle, Thomas fell and hit his head on the corner of the stove. He died before the doctor could come." Bea finally turned to look at Kyle, tears streaming down her face. "They said it was self-defense, said my brother was protecting me and it was an accident. But Thomas had family in town, important family. They made our lives hell. They spread rumors that I had been unfaithful, that my brother had murdered Thomas in cold blood. They got him fired from his job, vandalized our property. Finally, my brother said we needed to leave Louisiana, start fresh somewhere new." She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "We came to Texas with almost nothing. My brother found work in a cattle drive, but there was an accident 6 months ago. He was trampled during a stampede. He died instantly. I had no money, no family, no prospects. No one wants to hire a scarred woman with a dead husband and a dead brother. I ended up in a workhouse in Houston, but the conditions there were terrible. When they said they were sending some of the women to Humboldt for an auction, I volunteered. I thought maybe someone would take me on as a housekeeper or something. I did not realize they would sell me like livestock." She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "So you see, Kyle Winchester, you bought yourself a woman who is cursed. Everyone I love dies or gets hurt. My brother sacrificed everything for me and died for it, and I am damaged inside and out. That is what you spent your $200 on." Kyle was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. Then he stood up and moved to kneel in front of her chair, looking up at her tear-stained face. "Now you listen to me, Beatrice Vaughn," he said firmly but gently. "You are not cursed. You are a survivor. What your husband did to you was evil and wrong, and he got what he deserved. Your brother died protecting you and helping you because he loved you, not because you are cursed. And that scar does not make you damaged. It makes you strong, because you survived something that would have broken a lesser person." "How can you say that?" Bea whispered. "You do not know me." "I know that you got up the morning after being sold at auction and made breakfast for a stranger," Kyle said. "I know that you worked all day cleaning a house that was not even really yours. I know that you have endured more pain than anyone should have to, and you are still standing. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Bea stared at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for a lie, for some hint of insincerity. But Kyle meant every word he had said. "I want you to stay here," he continued. "Not because I bought you, not because you owe me anything, but because I think you deserve a safe place to heal and build a new life. And if you are willing, I would like to get to know you better. Not as property, not as a housekeeper, but as a person, maybe even as a friend." "I do not know how to be anyone's friend," Bea said brokenly. "Thomas took that from me. He isolated me from everyone who cared about me." "Then we will figure it out together," Kyle said. "One day at a time." Something shifted in Bea's expression, a tiny crack in the wall she had built around herself. She nodded slowly and Kyle stood up, offering her his hand. She took it and he helped her to her feet. "It is getting late," he said. "You should get some rest." "Kyle," Bea said as he turned to go inside. "Yes, thank you for listening, for not looking at me like I am broken." "You are not broken," Kyle said firmly, "just bent a little, and bent things can be straightened out with time and care." That night marked a turning point. Over the following weeks, Bea began to open up more. She still kept her scarred side angled away from Kyle when they talked, still touched it unconsciously when she was nervous, but she smiled more often. She laughed once when Kyle told her about the time he had tried to break a wild Mustang and ended up in the horse trough. It was a rusty sound, as if she had not used those muscles in a long time, but it was genuine. Kyle found himself looking forward to coming back to the house at midday, to sharing meals with Bea, to their evening conversations on the porch. He learned that she loved reading, that her mother had taught her to read at a young age, and she had devoured every book she could get her hands on. So the next time he went to town, he stopped by the small lending library and brought back 3 books. The look on Bea's face when he handed them to her was worth more than gold. He learned that she had wanted to be a teacher before she married Thomas, that she loved children and had dreamed of having a schoolhouse of her own someday. He learned that her favorite color was green, that she could not stand the taste of turnips, that she had a beautiful singing voice she only used when she thought no one was listening. And Kyle found himself falling for her. It was not the sudden, lightning strike kind of love he had read about in books. It was quieter than that, gentler. It was in the way his heart lifted when he heard her humming in the kitchen. It was in the protectiveness he felt when they went to town and men stared at her scar. It was in the way he wanted to tell her about his day, wanted to hear her thoughts, wanted to make her smile. But he was careful not to push, not to make her uncomfortable. He remembered what she had said about her husband, about the violence and control. He would not be that man. He would wait for her to be ready, however long that took. It was a month after the auction when things changed again. Kyle had been out mending fences in the south pasture when a late summer storm rolled in, fast and furious the way Texas storms could be. By the time he made it back to the house, he was soaked through and shivering despite the warm air. Bea took one look at him and immediately went into action, stoking the fire higher, bringing him towels and dry clothes, heating water for coffee. When he came back out from changing, she had soup warming on the stove. "You should have come in sooner," she scolded gently. "You are going to catch your death out there." "I needed to get that section finished before the rain made the ground too soft," Kyle said, accepting the mug of coffee she pressed into his hands. They sat by the fire, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. Lightning flashed outside the windows and thunder rumbled close enough to rattle the dishes in the cabinet. "I hate storms," Bea said quietly. "Ever since that night with Thomas, he came home during a storm like this." Without thinking, Kyle reached over and took her hand. She startled slightly, but she did not pull away. "You are safe here," he said. "I promise you are safe." Bea looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve goodness," Kyle said simply. "I think it is more than that," Bea said slowly. "I see how you look at me sometimes, like I am something precious, something worth protecting. No one has ever looked at me like that before. Even before Thomas, even when I was whole, no one looked at me the way you do." "You are whole," Kyle said. "And yes, I look at you that way because that is how I see you. I see a woman who is brave and kind and stronger than she knows. I see someone I admire, someone I care about." "I am scared," Bea whispered. "I am scared to trust this, to trust you, even though you have given me no reason not to. I am scared that if I let myself care about you, something terrible will happen." "Life does not come with guarantees," Kyle said. "Terrible things can happen whether we care about people or not, but good things can happen too. Beautiful things. And I would rather risk the pain of loss than miss out on the joy of connection." Bea was crying again, but these were different tears. Not the broken, hopeless tears of that first night, but something softer, more healing. "I think I am falling in love with you," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "And that terrifies me." Kyle's heart seemed to stop and then start again, beating twice as fast. "You do not have to be terrified," he said. "I am falling in love with you too, have been since the day I saw you standing on that platform, refusing to let them break you. I will wait as long as you need. There is no rush, no pressure." "I do not want to wait," Bea said. She turned to face him fully, the scarred side of her face visible in the firelight. "I have been waiting my whole life for someone to see me, really see me, not just the pretty surface or the damaged exterior. You see me, Kyle Winchester. You see who I really am, and I see you too. I see a good man, a kind man, a man I want to build a life with." Kyle cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumb brushing over the scar tissue. "You are beautiful," he said. "Every part of you." "I am not," Bea said, but there was less conviction in her voice. "You are to me," Kyle insisted. "This scar does not diminish your beauty, it adds to it. It is proof that you fought, that you survived. It is part of your story, and your story is incredible." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but she did not pull away. Instead, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative at first, then growing more certain. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "I want to do this right," Kyle said. "I want to court you properly, marry you properly. Not because I bought you, but because I love you and I want to spend my life with you. We are already living in the same house," Bea pointed out, a hint of humor in her voice. "Then I will court you in the same house," Kyle said. "I will bring you flowers from the meadow. I will take you on picnics by the creek. I will do everything I would do if we had met in a more conventional way." "That sounds wonderful," Bea said, smiling genuinely for the first time since he had met her. It transformed her face, making her eyes light up and her whole expression soften. "But Kyle, I do not need grand gestures. I just need you to keep being you. That is more than enough." They talked long into the night, the storm eventually passing as they shared their dreams and fears, their hopes for the future. Kyle told her about his parents, about how his mother had died giving birth to what would have been his little sister, about how his father had worked himself to death trying to run the ranch alone. Bea told him about her childhood in Louisiana, about her brother who had been her best friend, about the dreams she had put away when she married Thomas. "Maybe you could still teach," Kyle suggested. "There are children in Humboldt who need education. You could start a small school, maybe in town or even here on the ranch if we built a room for it." "Do you really think anyone would send their children to learn from a woman like me?" Bea asked doubtfully. "I think once they see how smart and capable you are, they would be lucky to have you teach their children," Kyle said firmly. Over the next few months, Kyle did exactly what he had promised. He courted Bee with a dedication and sweetness that made her fall more in love with him every day. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, taught her to ride a horse properly, took her on picnics by the small creek that ran through his property. They went to town together, and Kyle made it clear to anyone who looked at them sideways that Bee was not just his housekeeper or his property, but the woman he loved. The first time he introduced her as his fiancée, Bee's eyes filled with tears. He had asked her to marry him one evening on the porch, presenting her with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. It was not fancy, but it was given with love, and that made it priceless. "Will you marry me, Beatrice Vaughn?" he had asked, down on one knee. "Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our days?" "Yes," Bee had whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in the small church in Humboldt 3 months after the auction, almost to the day. It was a simple ceremony, attended by a few of Kyle's friends from neighboring ranches and the shopkeepers who had come to know and respect Bee. The preacher who married them had been skeptical at first, worried about the circumstances of how they had met. But after talking with both of them, he had agreed that theirs was a true love match. Bee wore a simple blue dress that Kyle had bought her as a wedding gift, and she left her hair down, no longer trying to hide her scar. Kyle thought she had never looked more beautiful than she did standing before him, promising to love and cherish him for the rest of their lives. Their wedding night was tender and sweet. Kyle had been patient, letting Bee set the pace, making sure she felt safe and loved every moment. When she had tensed up at first, old memories threatening to intrude, he had simply held her and whispered reassurances until she relaxed again. "I will never hurt you," he murmured against her hair. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you feel cherished and protected." "I know," Bee had whispered back. "I trust you, Kyle, completely." The months that followed were the happiest of both their lives. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Bee proved to have a head for numbers and took over managing the accounts, finding ways to cut costs and increase profits that Kyle had never thought of. She also started a small vegetable garden behind the house, growing produce that they could eat and sell in town. True to Kyle's prediction, word got around about Bee's education and intelligence. A few brave parents approached them about tutoring their children, and soon Bee was teaching a small group of 5 students in the main room of their house twice a week. She absolutely glowed when she was teaching, her passion for education evident in every lesson. Kyle loved watching her work, loved the animated way she explained things, the patience she showed with struggling students, the joy on her face when someone had a breakthrough. He had been right, all those months ago. She was not broken, just bent. And now she was straightening out, becoming more fully herself with each passing day. It was a year after their wedding when Bee came to him with news that made his heart soar. They were sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I am with child," she said softly. "The doctor confirmed it today when I went to town." Kyle pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "That is wonderful," he breathed. "Are you happy about it?" "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure," Bee admitted. "After everything that happened with Thomas, I never thought I would have the chance to be a mother, but with you I want this. I want to build a family with you. We will do it together," Kyle promised, every step of the way. The pregnancy was not easy. Bee struggled with sickness in the early months, and Kyle often found himself holding her hair back while she retched, then carrying her back to bed when she was too weak to walk. But he never complained, never made her feel like a burden. He was endlessly patient and caring, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her feet when they swelled, reading to her when she was too tired to do anything but rest. As her belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent evenings planning for the baby, discussing names, and preparing the spare room that had once been Bee's alone to be a nursery. Kyle built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth so there would be no splinters, while Bee sewed tiny clothes and blankets. The baby came on a stormy night in March of 1880, almost 2 years after Kyle had first laid eyes on Bee at that auction. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Kyle feared he might lose her. But Bee was strong, stronger than either of them had known, and when the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, she was exhausted but triumphant. "It is a boy," the midwife announced. "A healthy baby boy." Kyle looked down at his son, at the tiny perfect fingers and the shock of dark hair, and felt his eyes fill with tears. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "He is ours," Bee said, smiling up at him with pure joy on her face. "Our son." They named him Benjamin Thomas Winchester, the middle name chosen to honor Bee's brother who had sacrificed so much to protect her. Little Ben, as they quickly started calling him, was a content baby who rarely cried and seemed to sleep through anything. He had Kyle's dark hair and Bee's striking blue-green eyes, and both his parents were completely besotted with him. Watching Bee with their son filled Kyle with a contentment he had never known was possible. She was a natural mother, patient and loving, singing lullabies as she rocked Ben to sleep, laughing with delight at his first smiles and babbling attempts at speech. The woman who had once believed herself cursed now radiated happiness. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Bee had to temporarily suspend her teaching, but her former students and their parents came to visit regularly, bringing gifts for the baby and promises that they would wait for her to be ready to teach again. When Ben was 6 months old, Kyle came home one afternoon to find Bee sitting on the porch with a letter in her hands, tears streaming down her face. He immediately went to her, fear gripping his heart. "What is wrong? Is it bad news?" Bee shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, it is good news. Amazing news. This letter is from a lawyer in Louisiana. Apparently, Thomas's family has been ordered by a court to pay restitution to me for the damage they caused after his death. They destroyed my brother's reputation and livelihood, and the judge ruled that they must compensate me. It is a substantial sum, Kyle. Enough to expand the ranch or build a proper school building or whatever we want to do with it." Kyle sat down beside her, processing this information. "That is incredible. Justice after all this time." "I thought I would feel angry receiving this," Bee said, looking down at the letter. "I thought it would bring back all the pain and trauma, but instead I just feel at peace. That part of my life is truly over now. I have you, I have Ben, I have a future that those people tried to take from me. This money is not compensation for what they took, because what I have now is worth so much more than any amount of money. But it does feel like the final closing of that chapter. What do you want to do with it?" Kyle asked. Bee was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I want to build a school," she said finally. "A real school in Humboldt where any child can come and learn regardless of their family's ability to pay. I want to teach children that education is power, that knowledge can set you free. And I want to establish a fund to help women who are in situations like I was, women who are trapped and need a way out." "That is a beautiful idea," Kyle said, pulling her close. "We will make it happen." And they did. Over the next year, while Bee cared for Ben and gradually resumed teaching her small group of students, Kyle worked with builders to construct a proper schoolhouse on the edge of Humboldt. It was a simple but sturdy building with large windows to let in light, a potbelly stove for heat in winter, and enough space for 20 students. Above the door, They mounted a sign that read Vaughn Winchester Academy, honoring both Bee's maiden name and her married name. When the school opened in the fall of 1881, 15 students enrolled. Bee taught them all herself at first, dividing them into groups by age and ability. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and science, using methods she had learned from her own teachers and from the books Kyle continued to bring her from town. But more than that, she taught her students that their circumstances did not define them, that they could overcome hardship and build better futures. Many of her students came from poor families, children of ranch hands and shopkeepers and struggling farmers. She never turned anyone away for inability to pay, and she made sure every child had books and supplies, using the restitution money to cover costs. The Women's Fund was harder to establish, mostly because women in situations like Bee had been were often too afraid or ashamed to ask for help. But slowly, word got around that if a woman needed to escape a dangerous situation, she could go to Beatrice Winchester, and no questions would be asked. Bee would provide money for travel, help finding work in other towns, even temporary housing if needed. Kyle supported all of this wholeheartedly. He was so proud of his wife, of the way she had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. The ranch continued to thrive, and with the extra money from the restitution, they were able to expand their herd and hire 2 ranch hands to help with the work, freeing up more of Kyle's time to spend with his family. Ben grew into a rambunctious toddler, all chubby legs and infectious laughter. He adored both his parents and loved spending time at the school, sitting in the back of the classroom and trying to copy what the older children were doing. Bee often joked that he would be reading before he was 3 at the rate he was going. When Ben was 2.5, Bee discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1883 they welcomed a daughter into the world. They named her Catherine Rose Winchester, and she was as different from Ben as night from day. Where he had been quiet and content, Katie was vocal and demanding, making her presence known from day one. Kyle fell in love with his daughter instantly, marveling at her tiny features and the fierce determination she showed even as a newborn. "She is going to be a force to be reckoned with," he said, watching as Katie screamed her displeasure at being put down for a nap. "Just like her mother," Bee said with a tired but happy smile. With 2 children and a growing school, life was busier than ever. But it was a good kind of busy, full of love and laughter and purpose. Kyle and Bee worked as a team, supporting each other, picking up slack when the other was overwhelmed, celebrating each other's successes. The school continued to grow, and by 1885, Bee had to hire 2 additional teachers to help manage the nearly 40 students now enrolled. The building had been expanded once already, and there were plans to expand again. The Vaughn Winchester Academy was becoming known throughout the region as a place where any child could receive a quality education. The Women's Fund had also grown, helping dozens of women escape dangerous situations and start new lives. Bee ran it quietly, never seeking recognition or praise, but Kyle knew the impact she was having. He had seen the gratitude in the eyes of the women she helped, had heard the stories of lives saved and futures changed. One evening, when Ben was 7 and Katie was 4, Kyle and Bee sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Ben was teaching Katie how to catch grasshoppers, both of them shrieking with laughter when one jumped on Katie's nose. "You remember that first day?" Bee asked softly. "When you brought me here and I was so scared and broken." "You were never broken," Kyle said, taking her hand. "But yes, I remember. I remember thinking I had no idea what I was doing, bringing home a wife I had bought at an auction. Best $200 you ever spent," Bea teased. Best $200 I ever spent, Kyle agreed, smiling. Though you are worth so much more than that. I never thought I would have this, Bea said, gesturing to the scene before them. The ranch, prosperous and well-maintained. The school, visible in the distance, a symbol of hope and opportunity. Their children, healthy and happy and loved. I thought my life was over the day Thomas cut my face. I thought I would never be anything more than damaged goods. You were always more than that, Kyle said. I just happened to be the one lucky enough to see it. Bea turned to look at him, her eyes shining with love. You saved me, Kyle Winchester. You gave me back my life, my hope, my future. We saved each other, Kyle corrected gently. I was drowning in loneliness and grief when I met you. You brought light back into this house, gave me a reason to come home every day. You made me believe in the possibility of love again. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, watching their children play. After all the darkness both of them had endured, after all the pain and loss and struggle, they had found this. A life built on love and respect and partnership. A family that grew from the ashes of their broken pasts. I love you, Bea said. I do not think I say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I ever thought possible to love another person. I love you too, Kyle replied, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. Every day, more than the day before. As the sun set over the Texas plains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, the Winchester family remained on their porch. Ben came running up with a grasshopper cupped carefully in his hands to show his parents, and Katie was not far behind, demanding to be picked up so she could see better. Kyle lifted his daughter onto his lap, while Bea examined Ben's catch with appropriate enthusiasm. This was their life now. Not perfect, but real and beautiful and full of love. The scars of the past, both physical and emotional, had not disappeared. Bea still sometimes woke in the night with bad dreams, and there were moments when certain sounds or situations triggered painful memories. But Kyle was always there, ready to hold her and remind her that she was safe, that she was loved, that the past could not hurt her anymore. As the years continued to pass, the Winchester family became a fixture in Humboldt and the surrounding area. The school thrived, eventually growing to over 70 students and employing 5 teachers. Bea served as the headmistress, using her intelligence and compassion to shape young minds and change lives. Some of her students went on to become teachers themselves, while others became doctors, lawyers, and business owners, taking the education they received at Vaughn Winchester Academy and using it to build better lives. The Women's Fund continued its quiet work, operating mostly through word of mouth and helping countless women escape dangerous situations. Bea never advertised what she did, never sought credit, but the impact rippled through the community. Women who might otherwise have been trapped found freedom. Children who might have grown up watching violence learned that there were other ways to live. Ben grew into a thoughtful, intelligent young man who loved books as much as his mother did. He showed an early aptitude for medicine and eventually went east to study, writing long letters home about his studies and experiences. Katie, true to Kyle's prediction, became a force to be reckoned with. She was fiery and passionate, with a strong sense of justice that she inherited from both her parents. She announced at age 10 that she intended to become a lawyer, and no one who knew her doubted she would do exactly that. In 1890, when Ben was 12 and Katie was 9, Bea surprised everyone by having twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel James and Sarah Jane. The pregnancy had been unexpected, and at 34, Bea had been nervous about the risks. But the delivery went smoothly, and soon the Winchester household was filled with the chaos of infants again. Kyle, at 42, found himself changing diapers and walking the floor with crying babies in the middle of the night once more. But he did it with the same patience and love he had shown with his first two children. He was a devoted father, involved in every aspect of his children's lives, attending school events, teaching them to ride and rope, reading to them every night before bed. The ranch continued to prosper under Kyle's management. He had become one of the most successful ranchers in the area, known for treating his workers fairly and for the high quality of his cattle. But despite his success, he never forgot where he had come from, never forgot the desperate gamble he had taken when he bid on a scarred woman at an auction all those years ago. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, he would sit on the porch with Bea and marvel at how far they had come. From that first awkward day when she had arrived at his ranch, terrified and traumatized, to this life they had built together, filled with love and children and purpose. It was more than he had ever dreamed possible. "You have any regrets?" Bea asked him one such evening when the twins were 5 and sleeping peacefully inside. Ben was away at medical school and Katie was at a friend's house for the night. "Not a single one," Kyle said without hesitation. "Why do you ask?" "Because your life would have been easier if you had not bid on me that day," Bea said. "You could have found a wife the conventional way, someone without all my baggage and trauma. Someone who did not come with painful memories and night terrors." Kyle turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Beatrice Winchester, you listen to me. My life would not have been easier without you. It would have been empty. You are not baggage, you are a gift. Every challenge we have faced together. Every joy we have celebrated together. You made me a better man, a better person. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving. I would not change a single thing about our story." "Even the auction?" Bea asked. "Even the auction," Kyle confirmed. "Because it led me to you. I wish you had not had to go through all the pain that brought you there. I wish Thomas had never hurt you. I wish your brother had not died. But I cannot regret the outcome, because the outcome is us here together." Bea leaned her head on his shoulder and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the evening. Crickets chirped, the windmill creaked gently as it turned, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to its pack. "I used to think my scar was the worst thing that ever happened to me," Bea said after a while. "I thought it marked me as damaged, as less than. But now I see it differently. It is a reminder of what I survived, yes, but more than that, it is part of the path that led me to you. Without that scar, without everything that happened, I would not have been at that auction. I would not have ended up here. I would not have this life." "Your scar tells a story," Kyle said. "A story of survival and strength. I have never seen it as anything but beautiful, because it is part of you, and you are beautiful. You have told me that so many times over the years," Bea said. "And I think I finally believe it. Not because the scar itself is beautiful, but because I am learning to see myself through your eyes. And in your eyes, I am whole and worthy and loved. Always," Kyle promised. "Always loved." As the years rolled on, the Winchester family continued to grow and thrive. Ben completed his medical training and returned to Texas, setting up a practice in a town about 30 miles from Humboldt. He married a kind young woman named Elizabeth, who shared his passion for helping others. And they gave Kyle and Bea their first grandchild, a daughter named Beatrice, after her grandmother. Katie did indeed become a lawyer, one of the first women to practice law in Texas. She fought tirelessly for the rights of women and children, often taking cases for free when she knew her clients could not pay. She married late, at 32, to a fellow lawyer who respected her fierce independence and supported her work. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, grew up surrounded by love and opportunity. Samuel took over the management of the ranch when Kyle began to slow down in his 60s, proving to have his father's talent for ranching. Sarah followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a teacher at the Vaughn Winchester Academy, and eventually taking over as headmistress when Bea retired at 65. Throughout all of this, Kyle and Bea remained devoted to each other. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904 with a party that brought together family, friends, former students, and women whose lives had been changed by Bea's fund. It was a testament to the impact they had made, not just on each other, but on their entire community. At the party, Kyle stood up to give a speech, his hair now silver but his eyes still bright with love when he looked at his wife. 25 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the room, I made what seemed like an impulsive decision. I bid on a woman at an auction, paying more than I could afford, having no idea what I was doing or what would come of it. People probably thought I was crazy. Maybe I was a little crazy, but it was the best decision I ever made. He turned to look at Bea, who was standing beside him, her hair also silvered with age but her face still showing traces of the beauty that had survived so much. Bea, you came into my life when I needed you most, even though I did not know it at the time. You filled my empty house with laughter and purpose. You gave me children who I am so proud of I could burst. You built a school that has changed hundreds of lives. You have helped countless women find safety and freedom. You have been my partner, my love, my best friend for a quarter of a century. His voice thickened with emotion. That scar on your face, the one that made other men turn away, that was what drew me to you. Not because of the scar itself, but because of the defiance in your eyes, the strength in your shoulders, the refusal to be broken even when you were being treated as property. I saw a fighter that day, a survivor, a woman worth knowing, and I was right. You are the strongest, bravest, most compassionate person I have ever known. There was not a dry eye in the room as Kyle finished his speech. Bea stood and embraced him, and their children gathered around them, creating a circle of love that had started with a desperate gamble and a scarred woman on an auction block. As Kyle held his wife, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms, he thought back to that day in Humboldt, 25 years ago. He had saved her that day, yes, but she had saved him right back. They had healed each other, built a life together from broken pieces, created something beautiful from pain and loss. The auction that had brought them together had been a product of desperate times, a shameful practice that, thankfully, was becoming less common as society slowly changed. But from that injustice had come something good. Not because the auction itself was good, but because two people had chosen to see each other's humanity, to build a relationship based on respect and love rather than ownership and control. Kyle and Bea continued to live full, active lives well into their 70s. They became fixtures in Humboldt, the elderly couple who could often be seen walking hand in hand through town, stopping to chat with former students or the children of women Bea had helped years ago. The school they had built continued to thrive, and the Women's Fund, now managed by Katie and a board of trustees, helped even more women than before. On a warm spring evening in 1910, when Kyle was 76 and Bea was 72, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was quiet, with Samuel and his family living in a house they had built on the property. Their grandchildren, now numbering 8, visited regularly, filling the old house with laughter and energy. "You remember what you said to me that third night?" Bea asked, her hand clasped in Kyle's. "When I told you my story." "I said a lot of things that night," Kyle replied. "Which part do you mean?" You said that bent things could be straightened out with time and care, Bea said. I have been thinking about that a lot lately, about how true it was. I was so bent when I came here, Kyle, twisted up with pain and trauma and shame. But you were right. Time and care did straighten me out. Your time, your care. You did most of the straightening yourself, Kyle said. I just provided a safe space for you to do it. You provided more than that, Bea insisted. You provided love, real, unconditional love. The kind that does not demand or control but nurtures and supports. That was something I had never experienced before, and it changed everything. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set. It was a sight they had witnessed together thousands of times, but it never got old. Each sunset was unique, each one a gift. I am tired, Bea said eventually. Not in a bad way, just tired. It has been a good life, Kyle, better than I ever imagined possible. It has been a very good life, Kyle agreed, and it is not over yet, we still have time. But time, as it always does, eventually ran out. Bea passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years later at the age of 74. Kyle was holding her hand when she went, her face peaceful and free of pain. The whole community mourned her loss. The school closed for a week, and hundreds of people attended her funeral. Former students and their children, women whose lives she had changed, friends and family who had loved her. Kyle grieved deeply but without bitterness. He had been blessed with 34 years of marriage to the woman he loved, had watched her transform from a terrified, traumatized survivor into a confident, powerful force for good in the world. He had seen her become the mother of his children, the grandmother to his grandchildren, the partner who had made his life complete. He lived for 3 more years after Bea's death, spending his time with his children and grandchildren, tending a small garden and visiting the school that bore his wife's name. He often sat on the porch in the evenings, talking to Bea as if she were still there beside him, telling her about his day and the antics of the grandchildren. When Kyle passed away at 79, his family buried him next to Bea in the small cemetery on the edge of Humboldt. The headstone reads simple words that captured the essence of their relationship. Together in life, together in death, forever in love. The legacy they left behind was substantial. The Vaughn Winchester Academy continued to educate children for decades, eventually becoming part of the public school system, but never losing its commitment to providing quality education to all regardless of their ability to pay. The Women's Fund, renamed the Beatrice Winchester Freedom Fund, continued to help women escape dangerous situations well into the 20th century. But more than buildings and institutions, Kyle and Bea left a legacy of love. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren grew up hearing the story of how their grandparents met, of the auction that had brought them together, and the love that had grown from such unlikely beginnings. They learned that love could heal trauma, that kindness could overcome cruelty, that 2 broken people could come together and create something whole and beautiful. Years later, when one of their great-granddaughters was writing a family history, she included the story of Kyle and Bea's meeting. She did not shy away from the shameful reality of the auction, but she also did not let that define their story. Instead, she focused on what came after, on the choice they had made to build a partnership based on equality and respect, on the life they had created together. She ended the story with a quote from a letter Bea had written to Katie late in her life. "Your father saved me from a terrible situation, but more than that, he saved me from despair. He taught me that my past did not define my future, that I was worthy of love and respect despite what had been done to me. He saw me when I could not see myself, and in seeing me, he helped me become who I was always meant to be. That is what real love does." It does not fix broken things. It provides the space and support for those things to heal themselves. The story of Kyle and Bea Winchester became a family legend, passed down through generations. It was a story about redemption and healing, about love that overcomes trauma, about two people who found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built a life full of light. It was a story that reminded their descendants that the worst moments of our lives do not have to define us, that with love and support and determination, we can overcome anything. The ranch eventually passed out of the family, sold to another ranching family when Samuel's children pursued other careers. But the school remained, a permanent testament to Beatrice Winchester's dedication to education and opportunity. And in the cemetery on the edge of Humboldt, two headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a cowboy and his scarred bride, who had loved each other through 34 years of marriage and beyond, into whatever came after. Their story, beginning with a hammer falling at an auction in the summer of 1878, and ending with two lives well lived and a legacy that would last for generations, was a testament to the power of love to transform and heal. It proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, that what seems like an ending can actually be a beginning, and that true love really can conquer all.